All right, well, hello everyone. Welcome to another episode of Innovation Heroes, where we tap into the minds of innovation leaders from around the world to get inspiration to drive our own innovation goals. I'm your host, Adam Olson from HeroX, and I want to thank you all for tuning in today. I'm extremely excited about kicking off season 4 with two incredible guests. I have here with me our fearless leader and CEO of HeroX, Kal Sahota, and open innovation pioneer and the leader of NASA Tournament Lab and the Center of Excellence for Collaborative Innovation, Steve Rader.
Hey.
NASA and HeroX have been partners in crowdsource-based innovation for years now, with a variety of successful joint projects under our belts. There's going to be no shortage of amazing stories and insights in today's episode. So Steve, Kal, thank you both for joining me today. Maybe we could kick things off with some brief introductions and hear a little bit about how each of you guys got into the open innovation and crowdsourcing space. Kal, maybe you can kick us off.
Sure. So first of all, thanks for having us both, Adam and Steve. It's always such a pleasure to have a conversation with you. Like we were joking, you're going to have a difficult time, Adam, keeping us on track. So we tend to digress pretty quickly. So as you mentioned already, I am the president and CEO of HeroX. Been with the company now for 8 years, hugely passionate about this space. So if you want to know like kind of what drew me into the space and what drew me into open innovation, I would actually say that the world of open innovation found me. So, I was working at a small boutique and tax planning firm. I worked really closely with a co-founder to drive the growth of the business. But ironically, as it turns out, I did that a little bit better than I had hoped. And the business grew to a point where, he decided, I really don't want to grow the business anymore. I just want to manage my existing clients. Kal, take care of you for a few months, but you're going to have to sort yourself out. But then in the same conversation, he mentioned that he attends a business strategy course, strategic coach, outside of Toronto. And one of the attendees recently started a tech startup. And he felt that, my skill set potentially would be really good for what they're up to. So on a Thursday over lunch, I get walked to the door, if you will. And then the very next morning at 9 a.m., I spoke to Krishna Kadachini for the first time, the co-founder. And as they say, the rest is history. So, I'll also add that this is likely not somewhere I would have wound up. It wasn't anything that was in my lens to think that this is a career path that I want to take. So my journey here was quite serendipitous. In fact, I'd like to say that all roads led to HeroX. And what we're up to is so beautifully aligned with who I am. I honestly could not imagine being in a different industry.
Yeah. And that was what, 8 years ago now?
Almost to the day. Yeah.
Wow. That's amazing.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Steve, what about you?
Let's see. So I have been at NASA for about 34 years. They're straight out of school, and did several things. Flight control for a while. I did software development. I did communications work, communications architecture, systems engineering, and about 2010, I was having a conversation with my brother who worked at IBM, and he said, "Man, you have got to read this book on crowdsourcing. I don't know if you've ever heard of it, but you need to read this." And you know how it is when people recommend books, you totally disregard whatever your brother says.
Add to the list in your phone or whatever.
And I finally got the book, and it was by Jeff Howe, who was the Wired editor, who's credited with kind of naming it crowdsourcing. And I read that book, and I will say, halfway through that book, I realized everything has changed. Like the way we can tap into humans' brains through network capability and platform capabilities really is changing the game. And I immediately saw the application at NASA. And it just so happened that right about that same time, Jeff Davis at NASA was basically putting together a pilot where he had been testing a pilot with an incentive and yet two and a little bit with Topcoder. And they kind of had pioneered a system where we were starting up an internal crowd. I immediately engaged with that internal crowd and with the pilots and with Jeff and with Jason Ruzanne, who was also one of the managers working that. And, you know, I had immediately, after reading the book, joined 3 or 4 different crowds just to understand what was going on. I was in Quirky, if you remember Quirky, which is an site, trying to understand what these other folks were doing, why it was happening. I joined Clash of Clans because they had some community kind of things they were doing, and I was trying to understand why people would help other people for no reason, and you know, on and on. Innocent, like all these different crowds, and I was just trying to understand what was happening. And so a year or so later, NASA was standing up this Center of Excellence, and I met a friend that I'd worked with, Lynn Bucco, who was managing that group. And she said, "Hey, what are you doing these days?" I said, I told her what I was doing. She told me what she was doing. I said, "Wow, well, she's doing this thing in crowdsourcing." And I immediately said, "Oh, I know all about crowdsourcing," and went on and on. And it kind of took her back because she had never met anyone who had even heard of it, right?
Right.
And so pretty much as soon as they had an opening, I went and served as her deputy for many years. And then when she retired, I took over managing the program. But, you know, just getting open innovation going at NASA and across the federal government has just been a joy. And it's something I feel, you know, everyone will tell you, I am very passionate about this. I think this is the right tool at the right time. We've entered into a time when complexity and the tsunami of technology that's sweeping across the world and multiplying at rates we can't really fully comprehend is exactly in need of crowdsourcing, which really acts as this huge dragnet across all the different industries and across the world. So when you're trying to innovate, if you're not using crowdsourcing, you're not actually innovating very well because you're not leveraging just everything that's going on around the world. So that pulled me in, and that's made me passionate. And now I'm, you know, trying to make that all work for NASA.
Amazing. Yeah, it's so true that when you said the tsunami of technology, because that's what we're kind of seeing a lot as well these days, Kal. Like a lot of organizations just seeing, you know, metaverse or blockchain or whatever is coming up, and they just don't even really know where to start, but they know they have to start exploring it. And that's when they turn to the crowd just to try to, you know, get started.
Yeah, it's super cool though, like that, to be able to say, even NASA, who has rocket scientists at their fingertips, feels compelled to use crowdsourcing. So it speaks to the value that is there, and not just conceptually, but actually, that this program has been around for, you know, just hit its 8 years anniversary. Because I know I started at HeroX 2 days after you guys launched this. And I remember joining, and Christian's like, "Yeah, you're going to be the main PM for NASA." I'm like, at that point, didn't even know, like, not even the bare bones of what it was. And but I remember that it was just a few days in, so 8 years now, strong.
Few years into the noise contract, we actually had
it's true. Actually, it was longer before then. That's right.
Like 12 years. But yeah, it's crazy. It started in 2011 and it's been building. But yeah, the multi-vendor IDIQ that you came on right when we had that contract. It's been amazing. I will say that the thing, you know, when we started this, the message was, hey, crowdsourcing is cool. That you wouldn't believe what you can do. You know, we're talking about all that. And that landed flat at NASA because all of our people were, like you say, amazing innovators. And they, as individuals, you know, you when you're an engineer, you get to innovate about a teeny tiny bit of your job. The rest of your time you're in meetings or trying to deliver something. And the initial message they were getting from us was, hey, look at this cool thing. We can actually go outsource the very part of your job that you came to NASA to do to somebody who, you know, isn't as qualified. And that message, you know, obviously fell flat. There's a case study that they teach at Harvard Business School on our failure there. It's called Houston, We Have a Problem, and it's about the rejection of open innovation at NASA. And we had to change our messaging to where, and I think this is more accurate actually, which is to say, look, first off, we don't concentrate on the crowd members that solve the problems, because it does take the focus away from what our folks are trying to do. And what we say is, look, open innovation is an innovation tool for you to find and discover the best starting points for your innovation. And if you don't know about those latest and greatest tech, and you don't know about the ideas that people have, then you are not well equipped to go actually do the innovation that's required to get that next cutting edge solution. So when we started doing that, and we started actually using kind of a FOMO approach of, hey, these engineers over here that you know so well, they're succeeding because they're using these tools, that started kind of resonating. But we had to establish that need that says, hey, the world has changed, and the way you are finding the latest and greatest tech, those methods don't work anymore, and crowdsourcing is the new solution.
So did you find when you switched up the messaging, it instantly just dropped the friction that you were facing in the initial?
It really did. I mean, there's probably not one magic thing that happened, but that was definitely a contributing strategy. I think the other things that we did were simply building a portfolio of success that had lots of data behind it, showed very specific cases that could say, hey, look, we took on a really hard problem and we solved it. And we did it in this many days with this many dollars. And if we compare that to an estimate we did of how we normally would have tried to solve this, it was half the price and a much better result. And we could honestly make those assessments. It took a lot of measurement. It took a lot of data gathering to do that, but we were very intentional about the fact that we were building a set of case studies that would prove out to be the story behind this that was really important for people to hear. If they just hear crowdsourcing, it's the first time they've heard of it, their first question is why do I think this is going to work? Like, how is this even possible? And then when we can show them that, hey, people they know and respected have used this successfully, and not one case, but 35 cases, that starts to be something that they can't ignore.
So how long did that process really take for you, building out all those case studies to really get that buy-in?
We still do it today. We have not.
Ongoing process.
We're actually revamping our data system to a new version of Salesforce where we can actually more automatically gather even more data about the successes, and then being able to track those through life cycle. Innovation is really hard to measure because a lot of times the discovery phase is years before the realization of the system. And it's hard to know where it influences the design versus, it's great if somebody takes a design and just goes and implements it, but that's the exception, right? Most of the time it's, oh, this gave us an idea that then led us to this, that then we adapted to this, and then it transformed this, and then a new technology came in and influenced. So it's a organic process. It's always been an organic process for complex systems. Now, there are some things we get the idea, we go implement it, and then we're off the races. But that's typically the easier stuff.
I think the data is something that's so valuable. And even like with us, we work with so many different clients, so many different partners, but a lot of that data is under their roof, it's in-house. So for us to be able to say, you ran this project and this is how much it cost, but this is how much it would have cost. We don't have that comparison, unfortunately. At some point, I would imagine we would be able to gather that in a way that it's maybe anonymized. So it would be a little bit easier to share. But to your point, ROI is the metrics in general, the metrics behind open innovation and crowdsourcing, you cannot apply the traditional business metrics to it. And when organizations do, inevitably they'll look at it and say it's a failure because they're not comparing it and stacking it up the way they should. So I think there needs to be like a greater adoption across the board, and it's not any one thing. I think there's multiple things. There's so many different areas where you have to look to see, it's the psychological safety, which ties into company culture. If if we crowdsource this, am I going to now become, irrelevant? And with a lack of a solid company culture, there's a lack of psychological safety. And where you don't have internal processes that support open innovation. I mean, the metrics is one thing, the processes, the budget allocations, all of the things that you would require to actually get approval for a budget or a project, it's way more challenging because it just takes a different route. And until there's actual understanding of what that is and how it's implemented, I think there's not any one barrier. I think there's multiple barriers that exist. And some of those I think will probably fade away on their own as I think the newer generation of leadership comes into force. I think some of that will naturally go away because, the future of work, the new way of thinking, all of, passion-driven work, you only want to work with the things that you're passionate about. All of that will then be, naturally incorporated within their leadership. So I think some of that stuff will probably self-correct over the next decade or so. But for now, I think there's a lot there that needs to get unpacked and then repackaged.
Yeah, this is an area where when I took a step back and really tried to understand the why is this tool so important? Why is this approach so important? It really did come down to, we are at a point in the exponential curve, or curves, I should say, multiple, where the rate of change is just continually getting faster and faster. And that is what organizations are really struggling with. That and the combination of the expanding volume of this tsunami of technology. And it's the complexity that brings. And so many companies and organizations are struggling with how to keep up in this day and age. And you can see it in the stats. The most successful companies have gone from an average lifespan of 90 years down to less than 14 years over the last 100 years. And that is because they're having to adapt to these changes. And that those changes are the technology and the skills. And so that's why I think you're seeing this new emphasis on open talent, because it's not just the technology, it's who understands the new technology.
Yeah.
I talk a lot of our folks, I say, hey, look, if quantum sensors are going to upend your design for the next generation of whatever you're doing, do you even have anyone on your team that knows what quantum sensors are and how they work?
Yeah.
And how would you know if they can actually upend your world? Now, they might not, but how do you even know? And I could say that about half a dozen technologies that span all industries, right? So that's part of the issue, is the technologies are so prevalent across multiple industries that it's really hard to keep track of where all that are. And this is where open really becomes valuable.
It's interesting to what you're sharing. It's like when you think about the way you would normally, for example, take a product to market. You would have research, you would go through all the normal steps, you'd hire maybe an Ipsos Reid or one of these larger firms. But it begs the question, if you did that research today and you ask the same people in 6 months, I'd argue you get a very different answer. So you'd build out a product, in 6 months, it's already obsolete. So the way we did things and the way you're used to doing things, it doesn't apply anymore. And the whole idea of technology, I mean, I'm speaking from my own experience, we're very authentic at HeroX. I mean, even when large language models came about, ChatGPT, et cetera, how do you wrap your head around that? And before, in leadership, you would have a pretty good sense. You could go into the boardroom and still, guide the conversation. But my approach is very different. And I think a lot of leaders probably are leaning in that direction to say, I'm an orchestrator. I need to make sure that they're the right people in the room and to be able to ask the right questions. And you have the right stakeholders that are bought into what your vision and mission is, and they're supporting of you, then they will come to you with the recommendations. So you don't have to plant yourself in the middle. Your job is to make sure that you're putting the right people in the room that you trust and that tie into your core values and your mission. and are going to powerfully collaborate. You don't want all yesers. You don't want all no. You want those that are going to really have those engaging, meaningful discussions, and that's where the magic happens. So leadership is more has always been about orchestrating, but I think that the foundation to that is going to come more and more important going forward than ever before.
Yeah, it's so interesting because I think you're getting to kind of what does the organization of the future look like, and how does it stay robust and agile to this rapid change. And it's something that we're talking about a whole lot, right? Especially in the open talent world, where how much is enough. We know that the recruit and retain model has some fundamental brokenness to it, right? You can't continue to just hire more and more people as the skills fragment. You can't afford to do that. And then there's the people that really need to be going because their skills are no longer needed because automation's doing that. And how do you reskill those? And there's all of that work as well. What I think is most interesting here is just the abstraction of problem solving and innovation and product realization. How do you take something? How do you understand the market well enough? How do you then kind of get all the piece parts aligned to where it's not just an idea, but it actually gets out to market? And this is where I think we're going to see agility of the distributed crowd model or the distributed model and shared economy model start to really play a significant role. I think you've heard me talk about crowd 2.0, right? Which is when AI is going to be used to take these communities of 500,000 people and basically assemble them into overnight 50 teams of 7, right? Where each team is tuned to have exactly the right skills, but also maybe half the team knows each other already, and half the teams are matched by personality types, so that you get the most out of your introverts without the extroverts hammering on them, and they're facilitated, and they've all been trained on innovation methods. This is where I think we'll start to see platforms being able to do really hard, complicated things very, very quickly. Because you're going to get the best of folks. All of that kind of the stuff in businesses that takes forever, right? Getting everyone's schedule so that you can meet in the same room, and getting all the compliance, like all of the slowness just gets eked out of that kind of system. And then you'll be able to go to a distributed factory, right? Where it's a community of 500,000 factories, like many factories, if you are producers that can produce a piece of the puzzle. And it's about orchestrating all of those together to get something to happen very quickly. And digital infrastructure is going to be key to that. So anyway, I go on those rants. Sorry.
We warned you, Adam. It's like your job is going to be.
Well, I know. I'm thinking. I'm like, okay, well, I need to keep us going, but then I'm so intrigued with what's being talked about that I don't even really want to. Like, that's such a cool concept, the crowd 2.0, and it immediately popped in my head. It's almost how HeroX hires, and Kal, orchestrates the team. We all do like Colby tests, and Kal puts all the puzzle pieces together where they're supposed to be. So, that'll be a load off your plate when we can get AI to do that, Kal. All right, well, let's move along. Since we've been talking about all the tsunamis of technology and everything that's going on and all the excitement in the world these days, Steve, what's the main focus at NASA? What are you guys mainly trying to innovate around? I know you guys have a lot of projects on the go with us and other platforms as well. Can you even begin to narrow down into one specific thing?
It's interesting because what we're focused on is really scaling this tool set. My goal is that every engineer and every scientist at NASA knows about open innovation and knows when and how to use it, because it's not something you use every day, but when it's time to use it, you better know it's there and you better go use it, because it's going to affect what you produce. And so we're all about trying to scale that. Right now, our team is pretty maxed. We're running 95 different projects all at one time. And we only have about 12 people on our team. And not all of them coordinate challenges, right? So we're trying to work on an innovation academy that starts to train other people on how to recognize problems. A lot of times people don't even know how to recognize that they are a problem owner and that they need to be innovating on a next generation and how to go do that. So part of it is training people on how to identify the right problems and then understand where they fit in the priority, how they can budget for those, how to go execute those, and then how to use our toolkit. So we're very much working on that, along with kind of working to connect the infrastructure within NASA so that we are all working together. We have a lot of technology development programs like the SBIR and the NIAC program that's working on stages of innovation and working to fund startups and the rest. And what we need to do is kind of use our discovery tools to help make sure that we're all working together and rather than at odds. And so we're working really hard to kind of make that seamless. We worked with, for instance, the Flight Opportunities Office. I think HeroX has been involved in some of that, where we basically are reworking kind of the way they access people that come up with new experiments to go in technology that then gets proven on flight opportunities. So they've really reworked based on what we've offered, and we're trying to do that with some of the other programs as well, so that we can take the best of what crowdsourcing can do and apply it to the different stages of development. And that's kind of what we're finding is it is this wonderful discovery mechanism that discovers not just the cutting edge, but can find mature technologies that can come and really go start flying almost immediately. So it's this really versatile tool. My whole mission in life is to scale us up, to scale our data systems, to scale our training, to scale the knowledge of it, and to do it in a pace that doesn't fall apart. So that's why I'm like, okay, we don't advertise to anyone right now because we're at capacity and word of mouth has us really a full pipeline. Kal can tell you, she looks at the pipeline all the time. I see it.
He sees my little face in there every day.
And it's been very busy over the last few weeks and months. So we just continue to put task orders out for the contractors, and it's been really great.
You know, it's interesting when you share about where you want to get it to and where we were. You know, when I joined the space, as I mentioned 8 years ago, I would get onto calls and for the first 2-3 years, oftentimes would get confused with crowdfunding versus crowdsourcing of ideas. It was a very common misconception. And, you know, I would say that's definitely now in the rear view. Question probably still comes up periodically, but I'd say very, very rarely now compared to before. But, you know, when you're in conversations with clients and partners, I'd say that you're almost like at the tip of the spear. So you really get a real pulse for where things are at. So when you reflect like we are today, you really get a sense of how far we've really come. You know, I'd say that the buy-in for the concept of tapping into cognitive surplus outside of your core team is absolutely there. You know, I'd further say that, you know, the buy-in is going to continue to strengthen, particularly since the pandemic. But where we're going to see ongoing struggle, where I see ongoing struggle, is when it comes to removing those barriers and that friction, preventing organizations from like truly integrating open innovation into their everyday business processes, like a tool like we've talked about. So it taking it from that concept of a concept to a real tool into real practice. You know, they get it. It's just not easy to do. And I think that's what we need to continue to address. And to your point, where you're creating these tools and, you know, sharing the know-how of how to get it done. Now you know what it is. You see the value. Here's the how. So by, you know, simplifying and potentially even facilitating it, like your team is, I think that's what's key here.
Yeah, that emphasis on customer service, I think, has really played a big role in that our job is to make this as easy and productive and successful as possible. And I think when you have new initiatives within organizations, that is so important. And it is so often the thing that's just left on the floor. It's like, oh, we need to go do this, go figure it out. And we've had really great partners in our legal and procurement and finance area that help us to kind of streamline processes and interpret things and kind of reduce those barriers, which has been tremendous. It's interesting too, because we work with other federal agencies and NASA. And it's funny because many of the other federal agencies are working these big initiatives that are coming top down, which are go do these big initiatives. And that's great. And we have some of that at NASA, but our strategy is actually make this part of everyone's toolkit, because if you get everyone using it, you're going to get a much bigger return than if you just pick one project and say, this is where we need our innovation. And we're hoping that will eventually create a culture of innovation that is kind of a step up, which is, I think, what a lot of organizations are struggling with. How do we get innovation kind of embedded? And it takes a lot to push it out there and get real innovation tools that are solving real problems.
What's really amazing though, when you look at it traditionally, government is usually less creative, less agile. And what's really amazing is that in North America, most certainly in the US, that the government sector is actually leading the charge for open innovation, and enterprise is actually behind. And it's funny though, because in Europe it's flipped. In Europe it's the other way around, right? But I think that's pretty incredible how you have a government that's leaning so heavily into innovation. And I would say that from my perspective, I see it's going to be continued progression down that adoption curve. And you probably know the numbers obviously better than I do, but I would say that those numbers are going to continue to grow. And with organizations, likely with the support of tools and resources like we talked about, they are going to figure out the how. And in doing that, their business practices are naturally going to start to evolve and become, part of their internal processes. And that's going to become the key driver within their innovation strategies. That's what they need to get. This is just a tool in your tool belt to help you drive innovation. It's not, it's not a box to check. It's like when you need your laptop for everything that you do. That's the same. It's a tool, right? When you put your calculator, it's a tool. And when you start to see it as a tool, then it all makes sense. Because oftentimes, clients will say, this is really great. When I have a project and budget, I'll circle back. And what I say to them is, I want you to look at your quarterly, strategic and tactical planning. What are you up to? That's the place to look. Are you wanting to create a new product? Are you wanting to change your product path? Whatever that is for you, that's the place to look. Can I use open innovation as a start point to get those projects kicked off? If that answer is yes, and it should be, then the budget's already there. You just need to allocate it towards this tool, which will probably get you there much quicker.
Yeah, that's usually when we go to groups and talk about using something to it's their budget. They have to use the budget that they were planning to use, and they're going to put it on open innovation to try to actually get there faster. So totally agree with you. It is interesting that a lot of folks don't know what are they trying to do, like the big picture. That's what's fascinating. I see a lot of people say we need to innovate, and I'm like, well, what are you trying to do?
Yeah.
And they can't answer the question, and you're like, well, if you don't know what you want to do, don't try to innovate. Just get into problem analysis, trying to understand where you're trying to go first, and then innovate to get there. And we've got lots of tools to do that. But yeah, it's
actually a word that's overused.
Yeah.
Like when you're watching like advertisements on television, everything's innovation for cars, innovation for this, innovation for that. It's like, it's such an overused word. I mean, I'm not saying it's inaccurately used, but I think it's overused. And I think, there's probably some leaders that are sitting in their chair thinking, I should be doing more of this. And just tasking people saying, we need to innovate. Can you just go make this happen? But what we need to do and how we need to do it, that's the part where, there needs to be engagement. from leadership to middle management, all the way down. And I think where those internal conversations, I think those are so incredibly powerful. So when you leverage, the cognitive surplus that you have even within your team, especially some of these large organizations, they have like thousands that they can tap into. And it would be remarkable if they just asked them what would be the best way to do this, this, and this, and the responses they would get.
Yeah, it's interesting because we study this a lot because we do have an internal crowd as well. And I tell organizations, innovation is absolutely necessary if you're going to keep up. And you need to be doing it at a level that was not necessary 10 and 15 years ago. And it's kind of like IT. A lot of folks are way behind on the digital transformation, similar to they're behind on how to keep their folks agile and adapting to what's coming. But what I tell them is innovation is the most dangerous thing that you can tinker with in your organization. And if you don't take the time to do it right and do the innovation theater version, which is a lot of what's happening out there in corporate world, you can kill innovation in your organization and not be able to talk about it for 5 years. And we've met with multiple organizations where literally they will break down in tears. It's really sad, where they've been ordered by the top, go innovate. They go buy a tool, and then they ask, give us your innovative ideas, but they've not thought through the dynamics of what that means to ask that question. And it turns into a Dilbert cartoon just really, really quickly, because you actually have to have resources that can evaluate that. You have to be smart about it. You have to point the gun at a specific problem, because if you're not pointing the innovation gun at the right problem, you will get a mess. And that is that tool of innovation, those powerful tools will just kind of go off in your hand and leave a mess. So it's you absolutely have to do it, but you better do it right, because it is a dangerous thing. And that's hard to hear both of those things, because people want easy answers. And when it comes to innovation, there are not cheap and easy answers. People want to do it for free. I've had organizations say, we want to do innovation. I'm like, well, what's your budget? And they go, there's no budget. And I'm like, well, okay. Well, if someone comes up with a really innovative thing that they want to do, how are you going to fund it? And they're like, well, there is something about you have to have, you can't have a budget cut and then say, okay, open innovation is the way to go, but you're really replacing funds. You're not just doing it with nothing. So anyway, there's all sorts of interesting things about that.
So building off of doing innovation right, collectively, the two of you have 20 years in the space, 95 current projects. Are there any projects that stick out in your mind over the years that you maybe really did right, or might have not really done that right and it fell flat? Anything that sticks out you'd like to share?
Oh,
gosh.
I can go first because mine is easy. Mine jumps out at me only because of the company that I'm in right now. Is I would say the Lunar Loo project from back in 2020, and there was a few things in that project that really stood out for me. I mean, just really quick overview is so NASA is looking for new toilet technology for when they go back to the moon as a part of the Artemis mission. And at the time, my role at HeroX was VP of Possibilities, and we're very much a flat org chart. We go where we're needed. So at the time Lunar Loo was awarded to HeroX, we had a plethora of other projects that basically closed at the same time, and we're short project managers. And of course, I put my hand up and said, I don't mind. Let me PM this one. So it was a pleasure. It was the first time that I actually got the pleasure of experiencing our clients' full experience from beginning all the way to the very end. And Steve was actually one of the stakeholders. So it was a pleasure to collaborate together for so many months together. And the other thing that really stood out is that we hosted a similar project for NASA a few years earlier. So we expected to get a fair bit of press, because last time there was just so much excitement over it. It was over the subject matter. I think everyone's still a child at heart. But we had a number of underage submissions that came in on that first project. So our challenge to designers came up with a brilliant suggestion. In fact, I think it was Eloise Young that did. And she said, let's launch a junior challenge alongside the main challenge so we can support STEM. So thought it was a brilliant idea. So we worked with the NASA team to host an inaugural junior challenge. And we figured that, the submissions are going to come anyways. So why not let them come in and reward these young innovators with maybe some swag or some bragging rights or something. But, both those projects were so hugely successful. And you know what? We periodically host winners webinars at the close of a challenge. And so I had the pleasure of hosting both the main and the junior. Honestly, if any of our listeners want to be inspired, you have to watch that webinar. The intellect, the excitement, the unbelievable energy, it's going to leave you feeling moved and inspired.
Yeah, Space Poop and Lunar Lee are definitely fun. Space Poop had 5,000 submissions.
No, my goodness.
And 20,000 registrants. It was amazing. The thing about it is we have in our contract with HeroX, they had to, you had to go through the 5,000 and find the ones that met all of our criteria and only give us those to evaluate. And that was only 87. And I thought that was genius that you took that experience and realized that a lot of those were kids. And that what we really needed there was an educational challenge that went alongside it. So we actually use that all the time as an example of a really great way. There's probably going to be one we're going to try to do that with here soon. I think that was one of my favorites because I actually, when I was a flight controller, I was life support system. So all of those kinds of systems are ones I work. Other ones though, we actually solved, I used to work time delay communications for a long time, which is one of the things we worry about in space. Is when you go to Mars, your time delay can be anywhere from, 15 or anywhere from around 20 to 50 minutes. It's really a long round trip delay. And we had a problem in one of the network protocols we were trying to use to try to do the security. And literally everyone we talked to around the world was like, yeah, we really need a way to do that. And nobody knows how. It's this, because we use time synchronous methods to do security key exchanges. Nobody had a way to do that. And we went, and I think Topcoder was the one who did that challenge, but they had someone that came back and said, the Byzantine generals problem, if you're really a nerd, you'll know what I'm talking about. That's the way you're going to solve this problem. And we had been using that approach to synchronize our computers, our flight computers, to make sure that they could all stay and wouldn't get a bad computer that was controlling things. So we had the technology, but we weren't applying it in security. And it took someone that was outside of NASA to say, hey, you can actually, and to this day, that's the way that's been done. And that's so cool. From what we knew, was potentially an unsolvable problem. I'll mention a failure we had too, and I say a failure, it was one where we did not get a solution that was better than our own scientists and engineers, and that was around galactic cosmic radiation. It's a really significant problem once you get outside the Earth's magnetosphere. It's one of the big problems we have. And we did a couple of challenges where we were trying to get a better either magnetic field definition along with a kind of materials layup that could get you protection. Because right now you have to take a ton of water and it's very costly and heavy to work with. And we couldn't get anyone to submit anything better than our scientists. But when we looked at the submissions, the top 7 were all by nuclear physicists from around the world who had written, papers that probably took them, 40, 100 hours. And I thought from it, it's like, wow, I don't know how anyone else gets nuclear physicists from around the world to dedicate time to try to help you solve your problem. And then if they don't, it really just validates your own work, right? It says, oh, we really do have some of the best folks working on this, and we haven't missed anything obvious. So even when you fail in innovation world, that failure is important. One of the case studies I talk a lot about is Roche Diagnostics, that basically did a challenge after trying to get this problem solved for 15 years. They needed this very precise way to measure the sample. And they'd worked on it for 15 years and could not bring that product to market. They brought it in, did a crowdsource challenge, and in 60 days, it was solved. 2 people identified a technology that already existed that could do that. But when they looked at all the submissions, everything they had received had replicated the proprietary research they had done over. And I tell people all the time, innovation is about failure, but failure is expensive. And if you have one group that's failing, trying something new, failing, that serial process that's taking you time and money, whereas a crowdsource challenge can give you lots of failure very quickly. And it sounds funny, but who wants the failure? But you really do. You want to understand what doesn't work. And you want to have lots of that to work with. Now, it takes some time to evaluate that and whatnot. But when you're looking to innovate, failure is this huge component. And we often overlook the fact that crowdsourcing is this gift of giving you massive failure and shots on goal that you have access to.
That's such an incredible view on the process, and just silver lining, seeing the success even amongst the failure. I should have just booked this for 2 hours, but we are sneaking up on our time, so I want to be respectful of everyone. So I just want to finish off with one heavy hitting question. Steve, we can start with you. You've spoke about your vision of really embedding crowdsourcing and open innovation within your organization. But where do you see that progressing both in government and the enterprise companies over the next 5 years? Do you see everybody being able to implement crowdsourcing and open innovation the way you're striving to? What's your vision?
Scaling is such a tricky thing. We are hoping that more federal agencies see this as a path, and that they not just use our method, but we would actually hope that they establish their own methods and replicate some of what we're doing. We're definitely in the next 5 years trying to get it. I'm hoping that by 5 years, we will have all of our workforce using this as a normal course of action, that it's part of our science work, it's part of our engineering work, and that really there's nobody at NASA that doesn't know about this program. Today, that's just not the case. We are a very large organization. It's hard to get in there because people are busy. They're their heads down trying to do good work, and that's not bad. But we need, the next time they need this tool, to know it exists and be able to use it and have access to it. And we want to make sure that's there. I'm hoping that that we increase our engagement with all of the ecosystem of crowd platforms out there. We're on Noise 2, which is our NASA Open Innovation Services 2 contract. That's the second 5-year contract. There will likely be a follow-on to that, and it's very interesting to see where that goes. We had to raise the capacity of that contract from 25 million to 175 million because we were getting requests for use of that, and we'll see if we actually exercise all of that, but it's definitely something that we think is possible. Otherwise, we wouldn't have done it. And so part of that is we want good things to come out of this. We're focused on the results. And what's great about the chair that I get to sit in and Kal gets to sit in is we get to see what's happening at the, like you said, the tip of the spear that people are trying to solve. And I'll just say, I'm impressed with the people we have in government. They are trying to do some amazing things. We work with NIH, the National Institutes of Health, and CDC, and Health and Human Services, and Department of Homeland Security and the Bureau of Reclamation and NIST, and they're all trying to do these amazing things to help our country move forward and the world forward. Differential privacy made huge leaps under our program, which is, I think that's amazing that things NIST has done. There's stuff on kidney disease that's about to come out and be worked. Like, it's just really exciting to see what the snowball has become in 5 years. It's really hard to predict. I think people will be doing bigger and bigger challenges. I think the platforms, I expect in the next year, we're going to get a sea change in the kinds of submissions we get because of generative AI. I think we're going to start to see that piece balloon first, and then we're going to see platforms start to actually become an innovation machine in the way they tap into that human cognition. So that's probably a vague answer, but that's
exciting nonetheless. Well, thank you very much. Kal, maybe for your final question, if you had any advice for, innovators or sponsors looking at trying to explore crowdsourcing or just start, dip their toe in, what advice would you have for them?
I think for sponsors, I'd say go to the site and look at the current challenges. I know Steve and I have spoken to a few of them. When you see actual challenges, you see the different types of projects that are being crowdsourced. It takes the concept of crowdsourcing away from conceptual into real live examples. So it helps you to understand, regardless of what business you're in, this is industry agnostic, it applies everywhere. You'll be inspired to see how you could potentially utilize this tool for your organization to continue on your path of innovation. And, as far as and you can also look at success stories. I know we've talked a little bit about success, understanding, what's been solved for, what were those metrics, what did the results look like? For innovators, I would say, go to the HeroX site and get registered if you're not already registered. And again, just go on to see all those live challenges and look to see there's a plethora of them there. You can self-select anyone that you believe your unique ability ties into that you could potentially compete in. That's the other amazing thing which is what I'm passionate about, is it's uncredentialized, right? You don't require any credentials. If you want to work for NASA, if you knocked on Steve's door, if I knocked on Steve's door, he wouldn't open it. But if anybody knocked on Steve's door and said, hey, I want to work for NASA, he'd say, well, where did you go to school? What's your past experience? But if you want to work on a NASA project, if it's live on the HeroX site or any of our partner sites, if you have the best idea, you can compete and potentially win. And you can say that on some level, you work for NASA. So, I think just getting involved, understanding, that's where the future is. We need to better understand how we're going to work this into our business lives. This is the future. It's at the intersection of the future of work and technology. It lives in there. And us being able to understand how we can make that work and actually incorporate it into our business is going to be super important. And it starts from understanding. Once you understand, you grow from that, then the rest of it over time actually gets easier. It's like digital marketing, right? I'm old. So when digital marketing came about, it felt like a fad, but it wasn't. It was marketing is what it was. And you know what? Now you have in-house social media experts and content creators and, everybody maximizing your social media strategy. I believe in the next 5 years, there's probably going to be in-house challenge designers, crowd build experts, all of the areas that we now augment our clients' experience with on the platform will likely live in-house.
Yeah. It's quite the vision. And if that doesn't excite you to go run to the challenge page and to go compete for a NASA challenge, I don't know what will. Fantastic advice, though. So That's just bringing us to time. So thank you both very much for joining me today. It was fantastic to hear the passion that both of you have for crowdsourcing and open innovation and the way you speak about your experiences over the past 10 years, more or less. I'll pass the mic back over to either of you if you have any final thoughts or remarks you just want to bring up before I make my closing remarks.
Yeah, you go first, Steve.
Oh, I love working with you guys. It's great, Adam. You've been great through this, and Cal, I always enjoy time with you. So this has been great, and I appreciate it. And yes, we are all passionate about this, and that passion comes from we've seen this work over and over. Our success rate is 95%. Like we get value add almost every time, and so that's it's this isn't NASA trying to sell anything. It's we're saying we have used crowdsourcing over and over and over, and we get just really good results from it.
Yeah, and I'll echo Steve. Thank you so much, Adam, for being brave enough to host the both of us, because we hijack most of the conversation. But Steve, thank you for taking the time out. It's always such a pleasure to have engaging discussions with like-minded humans. And I will use your words. You oftentimes say to me, "You are my tribe." So it's a pleasure being a part of your tribe. And our conversations are always more than engaging, and they always leave me feeling inspired.
Love it. Thank you.
Mm-hmm.
I can definitely echo that as well. Well, thank you both again. And thank you everyone who's been listening today for the first episode of season 4. You can keep your sights on these powerful leaders as they progress the world of crowdsourcing innovation. And you can follow them both on their LinkedIn pages that will be linked in both the blog post and the podcast information. As always, you can connect with me directly on LinkedIn or reach out anytime at possibilities@herox.com. Again, my name is Adam Olson, and I'm always happy to continue these conversations off of the podcast. We have a free gift for any of our listeners that want to dive deeper into crowdsourcing innovation. There is a link to download the free crowdsourcing guide linked in the description and the blog post. So if you want to dive a little bit deeper, download that and have a look. Thank you for being a part of the solution. Until next time.